Feel free in front of me.
With my cold, too, it really sounds really good.
Yeah, you do have a cold. Thank you for coming. I know you've been sick today.
Let me inspect all of you now.
Brandon Cronenberg and his father, the acclaimed David Cronenberg, are both filmmakers that I deeply admire. While both are recognized for their contributions to the body horror subgenre, each filmmaker presents a unique worldview that is made evident throughout their respective filmography. David's films typically explore visceral, physical transformations of the body, delving into themes of carnal desire, violence, and the nature of reality. In contrast, the violence and horror related to bodies within Brandon's filmography originates from ideas of the mind and psychological corruption. His work centers on themes of identity and control, frequently blurring the boundaries between individuals and variations of the self, posing the question, what constitutes the self? In an article discussing Brandon's most recent film, Infinity Pool, critic Jeanette Katsoulis also writes about this distinction between their films, stating, Infinity Pool suggests that while the elder Cronenberg might be fixated on the disintegration of our bodies, his son is more concerned with the destruction of our souls. I feel that this perspective perfectly encapsulates my views and ideas surrounding the filmmaker's debut feature film, Antiviral.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you. For me, God is a disease.
I was delirious and was obsessing over the physicality of illness, the fact that there was something in my body and in my cells that had come from someone else's body, and I started to think there was a weird intimacy to that connection, and afterwards I tried to think of a character who would see a disease that way, and I thought, a celebrity-obsessed fan. Celebrity culture is completely bodily obsessed. Who has the most cellulite? Who has fungus feet? Celebrity culture completely fetishizes the body, and so I thought the film should also fetishize the body in a very grotesque way. Despite being made and released over a decade ago, to me, the film feels more currently relatable than ever. In the wake of the pandemic, its lingering effects permeate our lives in countless ways. The delirious obsession with the physicality of illness, the sensing of an imperceptible microscopic entity transmitted from one individual to another, infiltrating our bodies, is no longer an uncommon experience, but rather a universally relatable one. The inspiration for this video came to me after being inundated with information about potential new pandemic threats, juxtaposed with an abundance of celebrity-centric content and discourse. The controversy surrounding Chappell Roan has brought up much-needed discussions about needing to establish boundaries for those who live within the spotlight. A disturbing number of people genuinely believe they are entitled to access a celebrity's physical body, time, and personal life for the sole reason of having supported them throughout their career. I've also observed an alarming number of videos meticulously dissecting both the private lives and physical appearances of celebrities, especially the newly formed celebrities emerging from the immensely popular reality TV show, Love Island. Obviously, what I have discussed so far merely scratches the surface of extreme celebrity obsession. Despite my general disinterest in celebrity culture, even I found myself inundated with this kind of content. The jarring contrast between content revolving around disease and content surrounding the worship, judgment, and fetishization of celebrities made me think back to Brandon Cronenberg's film Antiviral. The world of Antiviral bears an unsettling resemblance to our own. If anything, it depicts a potential future should we continue on our path of celebrity obsession. Secularization theory is the idea that as society and scientific understanding advance, we will become less and less dependent upon religion for comfort and explanations. This trend is observable throughout history, from animism, which is the belief that every single thing in the universe possesses a spirit, to polytheistic religions like paganism, then onto monotheistic faiths such as Christianity. The theory hypothesizes that an advanced society would ultimately and naturally gravitate towards atheism. However, many scholars challenge this idea, arguing that it is unlikely that religion will entirely disappear. Instead, they propose that religion is likely to exist in new forms. Some scholars argue that it is possible for celebrity worship to function as a pseudo-religion in contemporary society. Fans of these public figures exhibit extreme devotion to their idols. They attend events for the chance to be close to their beloved celebrity, to see them, to hear them in person, many even describing this as being a religious experience. In the essay, God's Behaving Badly, Celebrity as a Kind of Religion, author Pete Ward writes, "Central to the argument that celebrity culture is a sort of religion is the notion of functional equivalence. Functional equivalence argues that popular culture appears to fill the void left by religion. Celebrity culture and popular culture more generally is seen as, in some way, performing a number of functions that were previously fulfilled by religion." Chris Rojic argues that celebrity culture acts in a religious way by offering a source for identity. He says that post-God celebrity is now one of the mainstays of organizing recognition and belonging in secular society. This not-too-distant reality mirrors the world depicted in Antiviral. Their world has gone past the point of normal celebrity obsession. To the viewer, it is made clear from the beginning of the film that their lives revolve around celebrities. Every television screen broadcasts content exclusively related to those who are famous. Citizens consume actual meat grown from celebrity cells and are surrounded by large billboards and posters featuring these individuals, whose faces loom larger than life, literally appearing to be gods in the sky, always watching. This scene to me perfectly embodies this metaphor. Sid, who is on the brink of death due to his illness, inhabits a world that is similarly decaying. Despite scientific advancements, their society lacks meaning and purpose, compelling them to seek meaning and divinity through celebrity worship. He descends into an empty pool, lowering himself into their barren, decomposing world, and gazes upward at Hannah Geist. She towers above him, resembling a celestial being, separated by a pane of glass. They are destined to exist in separate and opposing planes of reality. She represents an unattainable divinity while he seemingly suffers in an empty, meaningless world. Every single individual, regardless of age, is deeply invested in the lives of these celebrities. Boundaries have been egregiously violated, at least boundaries that would exist within our current world, with people feeling entitled to access even the most intimate details of their idols' lives, even showing uncensored nude footage on TV in extremely public places. They view these individuals as non-human, greater than human in some sense, so the normal boundaries for people are not extended towards them. This is further proven through the pitch that they use to sell the viruses.
She's perfect somehow, isn't she? More than perfect. More than human.
This replacement of religion with celebrity obsession is further emphasized during this scene.
So Lucas, how do you respond to critics who say the disease you're really selling is a cultural one?
That's ridiculous. Celebrity is not an accomplishment. Not at all. It's more like a collaboration that we choose to take part in. Celebrities are not people. They're group hallucinations.
The founder of the Lucas Clinic is what I would consider an atheist within their religion of fame. His assertion that celebrities are simply a group hallucination is true. It's honestly the best way to describe it, and also a very relevant comparison to cult-like religious belief. But his clients don't feel the same way he does. Their choices, ones that actually physically harm them, stem from a genuine attachment to these figures as objects of worship and veneration. The interviewer doesn't feel the same as his clients and fully understands that the founder knows how serious this attachment is, despite his denial. She continues.
Surely it's naive to imagine that your clients think the same way.
And they find meaning in all those stories around them. They choose to come to me because they want to feel more connected to those faces. Their lives are much richer for it.
In a world far more scientifically advanced than our own, individuals desperately grasp for meaning and something to believe in. The founder, despite being a non-believer himself, exploits this desire for profit. A similar sentiment is spoken about in Pete Ward's essay. James Twitchell identifies a similar functional link between religion and popular culture. He makes a connection between capitalism and the way that advertising constructs a kind of gospel. In a most profound sense, advertising and religion are part of the same meaning-making process. They attempt to bridge the gap between us and objects by providing a systemic order and a promise of salvation. In Antiviral, this connection between capitalism and the divine is central to the story. People purchase viruses in an attempt to forge a connection with their favorite celebrity. Advertising bears the faces of their gods, and what could better exemplify devotion than sharing a painful experience with the one you worship, suffering alongside them, being touched by them. In the film, the virus symbolizes both sexual intimacy with one's idolized celebrity and a sort of disturbed sense of divine unity. This is made evident from the opening scene at the Lucas Clinic when Edward arrives for his appointment. As he takes a seat beside another waiting patient, she looks at him before inquiring,
Excuse me? You look like a Hanegeist. I'd take you for a Hanegeist.
and then proceeds to tell him that she is here for someone else, a celebrity named Michael Felix, and proceeds to tell Edward a very intimate detail, or perhaps a rumor, about Michael. The ending of her story becomes dark as she makes it clear that the celebrity she desires has passed away, but she's just glad that they got to him first. This dark tone contrasts her excitement about being infected by his virus. This exchange establishes two things. Firstly, it illustrates the unity and oneness that these patients desire and how they perceive others with similar pursuits. They are nothing more than who they desire. It becomes their entire being, acting as a form of identity. Secondly, it reveals that contracting a virus from one's favorite celebrity is a kind of extreme fetish, driven by an intense need for closeness and connection. Even the marketing of these viruses is through slow and seductive speaking and an attempt to create an imaginary scenario for the consumer that helps them to fantasize that the virus was given to them directly by the celebrity. In Daisy Lafarge's book titled Lovebug, which explores metaphors of love and disease, she speaks about a poem from the 1590s titled The Flea. The flea was an established symbol in Renaissance erotic poetry, in which the speaker of the poem typically describes envying the flea for the liberties it takes with the flesh of his beloved. Don's poem sits comfortably in this tradition. The flea acts as an extended metaphor throughout the poem. First, it sucked the blood of the speaker, and now it sucks that of his beloved. The speaker points out that, even though his beloved refuses to be intimate with him, the blood-sucking flea has already brought their bodies together. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingled be. While in the context of this specific poem, it is more likely that the intermingling of blood symbolizes intimacy between unmarried lovers. It feels so closely related to what is happening within the film Antiviral. In the film, fans cannot physically be with their idols, but through sharing a virus, a biological entity that moves from one body to another, they achieve a semblance of the union described in the poem, where their bloods metaphorically mix and become one.
Biological communion between you and Arya. From her body to your body. From her cells to your cells.
Communion. Noun. An act or instance of sharing. A Christian sacrament in which consecrated bread and wine are consumed as memorials of Christ's death or as symbols for the realization of a spiritual union between Christ and communicant, or as the body and blood of Christ. At first, it seems that Sid is using the term biological communion to illustrate this direct sharing of the virus between the woman and the celebrity she adores. From her body to your body, from her cells to your cells. It's seductive and enticing for these individuals to imagine such a physical act of sharing between them and the subjects of their desires. But as we travel deeper into the film, this specific phrase, biological communion, becomes more clever as we begin to discover their adoration for these celebrities is more than just adoration, it's worship. And this communion, the consumption of the body and the blood, is both literal and sacred.
I don't understand how this isn't considered cannibalism.
Well, these are just muscle cells. It all depends on whether the human being is found in its materials. Right now, the law tends towards something more religious.
Being touched and infected by those they adore should be enough. They have something that coursed through the body of the other, infected them, was then extracted to enter their body and infect them in the same way. It's a direct link, but for them, it isn't enough. Love's most intimate union is through eating, tasting, and seeing interiorly. He eats us, we think we eat him, and we do eat him. Of this we can be certain. My theory is that their world, however far in the future, is so scientifically advanced that they have lost a lot of what originally gave them joy and wonder, and now all they have is their worship. This worship becomes greedy and they will always desire more. They feed on meat made from the cells of those they worship. It is not enough to share a virus with them, to feel as they feel, to suffer as they suffer. They also must consume them. And even the fixtures that the cells grow on to eventually become meat resemble some distorted webbed cross, which feels entirely intentional with the constant reference to communion and the divine. For a while online, there has been a discussion of cannibalism as a metaphor for intense romantic love, and as someone deeply interested in cannibalistic themes in film and also its historical significance and evolution over time, I believe this to be overly simplistic. It's something that I've been planning an entire video on, but for Antiviral, I want to emphasize that the character's feelings towards celebrities aren't love, but rather obsession, a crucial distinction. As we'll explore later in the video, the people of this world aren't emotionally affected in a genuine way by their idol's suffering. Considering the ending of the film, they're even gratified as long as it continues to fuel their desires. This dynamic illustrates obsession and consumption, not love. The allusion to religious communion, the literal consumption of body and blood, becomes explicit in the film's closing moments. Sid, having largely betrayed Hannah for his own survival and desires, confines her neither dead nor alive body in a device. Without remorse, he cuts her open and drinks the blood flowing from her body. Medieval scholar Caroline Walker Benham describes how almost all mystics spoke of tasting God. Many wrote of drinking blood from the breast of Christ, and Mechtild of Magdeburg deemed blood a superior food.
The skin grafts grown from celebrity skin cell samples. You know, I'm not a spiritual man. The belief in God has always struck me as a sign of dangerous infantilism. With each of these patches, my world has become more charged. That there is a power, something in the thrall of the collective eye that can be consumed and appropriated.
Dr. Abendroth echoes many ideas I have discussed throughout this video. He touches on secularization theory, dismissing belief in God as childish, yet simultaneously acknowledges the inexplicable sacredness within this celebrity-worshipping pseudo-religion. Despite his scientific background in a world that is literally grounded in logic and technology, he recognizes an intangible feeling of something greater, a sense of the sacred within our mundane existence. He understands, as the creator of the Lucas Company spoke of earlier, that it is less mystical and more of a collective hallucination, but the feeling is there regardless. There is something that cannot be explained away entirely by science, and it gives his life meaning and purpose. how could he deny himself of that? Some medieval Christian mystics describe an explicitly physical, at times carnal, relationship with God. Catherine of Siena claims to have worn Christ's foreskin as a wedding ring. Margaret Porete wrote of being melted by God and remade by him in the middle of the marrow of divine love. It's not hard to imagine that some individuals would undergo the radical procedure of grafting celebrity skin, the skin of their gods, onto their own, seeking an intimate connection or a visceral understanding of them. This extreme form of body modification mirrors the real-world phenomenon of people pursuing drastic plastic surgery or dramatically altering their appearance to become more like specific celebrities. It's surreal if you really think about it, the willingness to shed one's own identity in favor of literally stepping into the skin of someone else. This obsession also parallels the market for celebrity DNA relics online. Numerous listings offer strands of hair, worn clothing, and undoubtedly more questionable items. In both our world and the universe of Antiviral, the physical remains and possessions of celebrities have a close to sacred status. When rewatching Antiviral with this idea in my mind of a scientifically, seemingly non-religious world, adopting fame and celebrity as their own sort of religion, I kept trying to figure out who is Sid March and what is he really driven by. The first time we hear Sid talk, he is staring obsessively at a video of Hannah Geist. He seems mesmerized by her, truly, as if he can't even bear to blink since he will lose her for a single moment. It felt, at least to me, that he meant what he was saying. But soon it is revealed that that is only his seductive sales pitch, and one that he reuses practically word for word with each client. Around this time, we observe Sid stealing from the clinic he works at and selling these viruses illegally. He subjects his body to severe illness, yet doesn't seem to buy into the actual product that they're selling, or rather, the group hallucination. At this point in the film, his actions appear driven primarily by greed, rather than a genuine devotion to the celebrity cult that he exploits. So upon the middle of my rewatch, I was beginning to feel that within this metaphor of celebrity and religion, Sid was a true atheist. But then this scene made me question my perspective of him. This scene to me is the first time he takes off his mask. There's no one around to see the real him besides us. He seems to be genuinely concerned and distraught at the idea of her being trapped and needing help. And the fact that what she is saying is so personal adds to his distress. It's difficult for him to even leave the room. He seems to hold compassion for her, love for her, something deeply personal. Has this always been there, hiding? Even Dr. Abendroth can see through his facade. A few scenes later, he says,
"You play the skeptic, but I don't believe it. Surely you could have stolen Hannah's blood without injecting yourself. Why did you do it? Maybe you feel what I feel."
As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Abendroth, despite dedicating his life to science and dismissing belief in God as childish, perceives something transcendent in the group hallucination of these celebrities. And he can see this in Sid, that perhaps he's the same way. Sid's true feelings become more apparent after their first real meeting. Although they had briefly met when Sid came to take her virus, this scene marks their first genuine interaction. Sid appears to be in awe, as if in the presence of something divine. Even as she suffers severely from her illness, he perceives her as sublime. This is made evident in how we see her through his eyes. Her terminal condition is not repulsive. To him, it is beautiful and even seductive. After this meeting, he has a dream that mimics his first time seeing her, except when he enters the room this time, she is alone and without an eye mask. She appears so flawless that she almost looks artificial, like a porcelain doll or mannequin, beautiful yet eerily lifeless. As he approaches her to draw her blood, the scene abruptly ends before we can see what he does. I believe that this is where he first got the idea of continuing her existence into a forever preserved, beautiful afterlife. In the dream, he envisions her dead, but more like Snow White, with none of the grotesqueness process of human death. He imagines her like an incorruptible saint, forever frozen, forever beautiful and young. This becomes his dream, and it is mimicked in the final scene. She is alive forever, locked in a glass box. Although this reality is more ugly and grim, but for him and everyone else in their society who worships these celebrities, they can't bear to let go of their obsession. Sid is the real virus, because he really is like the people of his world. They worship celebrities but don't actually care for them. Their worship is entirely self-serving. Even after witnessing all that Hannah went through, and then experiencing it himself and interacting with her in person, he is more than happy to both save himself and also keep her and consume her for as long as he lives. The host must stay alive so that he, and by extension the society that he represents, can feel alive. He desires her, but the real human that is Hannah Geist doesn't exist to him. That version of her, the human being, is irrelevant.
From the perspective of the virus, the human being is irrelevant. What matters is the system that allows it to function.
When I was a little girl, my mother used to ask me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would tell her, "I don't want to grow up." So I guess in a way this is my childhood dream realized. Welcome everyone to my afterlife.
Sid is the virus, or perhaps a part of the larger societal infection that preys upon celebrities. They elevate these figures to godhood, rendering the human beneath the group hallucination irrelevant. Although I do feel for these people that they have to live within this world, existing in a cold, soulless environment that is perpetually bathed in harsh white light reminiscent of a sterile laboratory. They themselves have also become equally cold. The true victims are Hannah and the other celebrities, who are dehumanized by their own worshippers. I feel like this comparison to their society's lifelessness and them acting as viruses is made even clearer through this quote about the nature of viruses from the book Lovebug. According to the conventional definition of what constitutes life, viruses are outsiders, marginal entities in the drift space between life and lifelessness. If a cell is a city, as the so-called father of pathology, Rudolf Virchow, conceived of it, then viruses are the shadows that move beyond the city walls, peripheral and aberrant. The toxicity of this relationship between society and the beings they worship becomes glaringly apparent when news of Hannah Geist's death, which at first is a lie, becomes public. The coverage of the event is all-consuming, yet while people express sadness for themselves and Hannah and her loved ones, in reality their grief is self-centered. When they talk about her death, they speak about it in the ways that it has impacted them personally, like something they owned has been taken from them, and so suddenly. This is perfectly exemplified when Sid is captured and they speak to him over the intercom saying,
Many of Hannah's admirers have experienced what could be described as an uncomfortable narrative gap between her life and funeral in these moments, but through you, we have a window into the past. By documenting your deterioration, we can ease the suffering of millions.
It is so strange to think that these people feel uncomfortable with how little information they have gotten regarding Hannah's death. They want details, information, access to her personal life, even if, in this case, it is at the expense of an innocent person. They want to watch Sid suffer and bleed and live in pain until he finally dies, so they can superimpose the image of Hannah onto him and feel satisfied with consuming, in some form, the entirety of Hannah's dying process. If they genuinely cared for the human being that is Hannah Geist, then they would be in so much pain seeing what she went through. It would be unbearable, but instead they crave it. In the end, Sid and Hannah's managers decide to go with the option that will allow her to be used and consumed for potentially eternity, despite having known and actually seen in real life all the pain she was going through in her last days. I am sure they could have found some way to work out a deal with Volentesser to use her in some other way to make money, but Sid acted selfishly, both wanting to live and also wanting to fulfill his previous daydream about keeping her locked away forever, young and beautiful and desirable, and having constant access to her. Because again, in the face of the virus, the human being is irrelevant. Like a princess in a macabre fairy tale, Hannah is locked away in a glass box, destined for perpetual consumption and exploitation. This to me feels like anyone's personal hell. It's evident that Hannah had little agency over her own life. The glimpses we see of her reveal nothing but misery. Her managers seem to have ownership over her body and life, much like the Lucas Clinic's monopoly on her viruses, preventing rival companies from profiting off of them. The seemingly AI-generated video of her cheerfully discussing eternal youth and beauty, inviting everyone to her afterlife, is particularly disturbing. We know that she wasn't healthy enough to film that video, and it feels so similar to the trapped glass box version of her that we saw earlier in the film, which had to be AI generated with its capacity for unique responses to people who interacted with this digital version of her. This situation eerily mirrors the posthumous treatment of Marilyn Monroe, and I don't believe the physical resemblance, the signature red lips and platinum blonde curls, is coincidental. As I spoke about briefly in my last video, photographers snuck into the morgue to capture pictures of Marilyn's corpse. Even in death, these women are consumed and exploited. This scenario is profoundly disturbing and also alarmingly close to the world of Antiviral. In a way, it asks the question, if we possessed technology similar to that in the film, what horrible things might happen to beautiful young women who passed away young? Would they ever find peace, or would their human essence become irrelevant in the face of the grand image of her celebrity persona, forever used and consumed? Also, when speaking of this, I can't help but talk about the connection to Laura from Twin Peaks. Antiviral features a direct homage. Sid enters a red curtain room, encountering a seemingly trapped Hannah Geist pleading for help from within a box, only to realize both are only digital. Still, this version of her suffers, pleading that she will do anything for help. This version of Hannah, though artificial, feels like the closest we get to her human self, one we'll never truly know. The entrance of a man in a dark suit into a red curtain room where a woman is trapped and in need of help is an obvious homage to Laura. It makes me think of one of my favorite quotes from any film.
And the angels wouldn't help you. Because they've all gone away.
This homage feels fitting given the parallels between the two girls. Both are largely enigmatic, their personas overshadowing their true selves. They're primarily viewed through screens, eternally trapped in states of suffering, failed by those around them. For Hannah too, the angels have all gone away, since there is no one willing to save her. In a seemingly godless world where fame becomes both a new kind of religion and also a ravenous, ugly disease, her human self is left to forever suffer, imprisoned behind glass, used and used and used.